Hey guys, welcome to the Pastor to Pastor podcast. Man, we are excited about our episode today. I'm here with Pastor Dan Livingston.
What's up?
All the above. And man, just kind of excited to talk about one of the new blogs that's dropping for us that you wrote, and on this idea that does God even care?
A question thought often by pastors, but not asked out loud that much.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think that where do you think that kind of question comes from? Or maybe I can ask you this way. Where have you been in certain places of your life where you've asked that question, or you feel like that question came up more often?
Well, we don't have that many hours. There's so many, right off, I could say when our son was in a motorcycle accident, given zero chance to live for 24 days. You pray, you do everything. You're told he's 100% brain dead, for 24 days, and then you're told you've got to turn him off. And you pray and do all the things that you're supposed to do, and you don't see any change at all. And then suddenly out of nowhere, we get a miracle.
Yeah.
And then we go through a different scenario with my grandson, your son, Javen, and you do all the things again that the Bible says to do, and you have a different ending, and yet we know that God was sovereign in both. Yeah. That his perfect will and plan was done in both. And it goes back to really the teaching that you have brought to the church, which is so powerful that I keep insisting that you put in the book, the revelation and all that God gave you that I didn't get immediately. I had to learn it from you. Yeah. That we all know that God's sovereign and God doesn't make mistakes, but yet when you're in the middle of that fire, I not only lost a grandson, my son lost a son. So I got two dynamics going on and I couldn't stop either one. Yeah. But we've been on the end where God miraculously showed up, and defied all medical science. And then we believe with the same faith, prayed to the same God, and he answered a different way. And it comes back to the question that you've presented to the church. And when you talked about it, was the focus or the issue was not that God took Jabin. The issue is, will I now trust him? Yeah. Will I still love it? Will I still believe in him? Will I still trust him and believe and know that he did the right thing? Yeah. And I think in ministry that's still the journey that we find ourselves on, regardless of what the arena is do I really believe the sovereignty of God? Do I really believe that the footsteps of the righteous are the order of the Lord? Because they've taken me in places I didn't want to go. Yeah. And face experiences I didn't want to face. And puts chapters in our book that we don't want to write, but yet they're required to make the book effective, right? And have the powerful meaning that God wanted it to be. The whole Bible's a book of pain, right? And so throughout that Bible, we even hear Jesus look up into the heavens and say, my God, why have you forsaken me? Do you not care? Right. And so I believe it's all part of the journey. It's us really understanding it and then embracing it as much as we embrace he's my healer, my provider, my helper, my hope. He's also the God that's going to take me through some paths that aren't comfortable or desirable, but it's there that I grow the closest to him that I will get to.
And I think that, I think that that's the part that oftentimes we just miss. We miss it in our pain. We miss it in our sorrow. We miss it in our grief, and I think that the way that a lot of preachers communicate have also created just a really bad brand for us to understand how we're going through pain, right? So when we preach that, I've heard pastors say, I refuse to make room in my theology for pain and suffering. And it's like, well, if you refuse to make room in your theology for suffering, then you've just dismissed half of Jesus' teaching. In particular, in this world, you will have sorrow, you will have pain, you will have struggles, you will have tribulations, but take heart, I've overcome the world. In other words, like, you're going to experience these things in this world, but I've overcome the world. Therefore, this isn't the end. And, right. And I think that that's such a, I was talking with a pastor this past week about why I believe the American church in particular is at a disadvantage with our blessings and our abundance and all of those things. And one of the reasons why is I do not believe that the American church thinks eschatologically. In other words, I don't think that we disciple and preach and live with the end in mind. We do those things with the temporal in mind. Yeah. Therefore, we can question God and say, do you even care? Because all we're thinking about is where we're at. Right. We're not thinking about where we're going. And pain has a way of doing that, right? Pain has a way of blurring the long game so that all you can see is the short game. You can have a broken arm, but if you bang your pinky toe, for that moment, all you're thinking about is that pinky toe. Yeah. And I think that's where some of us are in our pain journeys, and so we can ask that question, does God even care, when all we can feel is what we can feel?
Yeah. And it goes back to what we said earlier, the whole Bible is a book of pain. It's, prison, hungry, homeless, killed, suffering, snake bites.
Paul knew it better than anyone.
And it's the same Paul that said that I might know you in the power of your resurrection and the fellowship of your suffering. Nobody wants to suffer. Yeah. I mean, that's a fool that asks for it.
Sure.
But we go back to what we've said over and over, the gospel was written to a Eastern world, correct, an Eastern church, and has now been interpreted by a Western mindset that's correct, comfort and ease, and, God's going to take care of me, and there's no suffering, no pain, and that's not reality. No. We don't want it. We don't ask for it, but it is required, and it's all part of the journey. If we took all this suffering out of the Bible, we wouldn't have anything to motivate us to trust God right now. Yeah, right. I always say, you celebrate out of your victories, but you minister out of your pain.
Right.
Telling your stories of wins encourages people, but it doesn't carry them through their journey of life. But when people can hear you say, I went through this, but God was faithful. God was true to his word. I couldn't find him at times, but he was there. I see it now. Yeah. And through the story of our struggle and our pain and our steadfastness, right, that you hold on and you believe God and you trust God and he shows up, then all of a sudden we have a chapter in our book that's going to change people's lives. That's right, going to let their book be fulfilled and completed.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of the song Christ Be Magnified. I think Cody Carnes, the one that wrote it. I just looked up the lyrics. Cody Carnes, Corey Asbury, and Ethan Gregory Hulse. And in the bridge of that song, I remember hearing the song for the first time and I was like, oh, that's a good song. It's just like, it's kind of like, it's peppy. It feels good. And this is the bridge. And I remember hearing the bridge of the song for the first time and going, almost like, wow, like that's something I can declare. And it says, I won't bow to idols. I'll stand strong and worship you. And if it puts me in the fire, I'll rejoice because you're there too. I won't be formed by feelings. I'll hold fast to what is true. If the cross brings transformation, then I'll be crucified with you, because death is just the doorway into resurrection life. And if I join you in your suffering, then I'll join you when you rise. And when you return in glory with all the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing and my song will be the same. Oh, Christ be magnified. And I think that sums it up perfectly. We have to experience all the things that we experience. We have to experience the joy, the suffering. We will be like Paul. We will be like Christ. I mean, if our ultimate goal is to be like Jesus, he was crucified. if that's our hero, if that's who we want to be like, we've got quite a road in front of us, but the reality is, though we will experience pain, though we will experience sorrow, we'll also experience joy. We'll also experience, the celebration of all the things that we get to do with the calling that's on our life. And so, man, what a tension to hold both of those things, the joy of ministry, the joy of our calling, and the pain of life simultaneously.
Yeah. Well, I think about it when I was writing the blog, it would have got way too long. So I decided I'm going to write a separate one on what I'm going into now. But, it's fatherhood. As a father of 4 children, the joy of being a father and watching your children succeed and be productive in life. And I was telling someone the other day, anything I spend on my children right now is an investment, because I never had to spend $1 getting one of them out of trouble. Never been in court with one,
Yeah.
And I found out later that y'all did stupid things.
We came close.
And the only reason you're alive now is I didn't know. But anyway,
we came close.
TC was salvaging TC.
That's
God was salvaging TC by not letting me hear.
It was the calling that protected me. Yeah.
But anyway, as a father, the joy and the honor, when I sit on the front row and watch you preach and get to be, sitting there going, that's my son, or I watch my children serving in the ministries wherever they are, and just successful business entrepreneurs, whatever they're doing, I have that side of me that's that father going, yes, yes, yes. And then on the other side, there's a lot of burden that comes with being a father. When you see your children suffer or you see them go through hurt or pain, you feel that, you carry that. Well, that's the life of a pastor. And so as so often we, as you said, we get to experience the joy of being called to pastor, to preach the gospel. I mean, all of that side is like, there's nothing to compare to that feeling,
Right.
When somehow God used you and gave you a word during the night or wherever, and you deliver that on Sunday and people come to you and go, that transformed my life. I mean, there's few feelings that can compare with that. And yet they don't see that those are our children. And as a pastor, you carry their burdens, whether you want to or not. When you hear they're hurting, you hurt. When you know they're going through something, you carry that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's times that can become so overwhelming as a pastor that unconsciously we let it just pile up until we're like, I'm emotionally and mentally exhausted.
Yeah.
And I'm asking God, is this worth it? Do you even care?
Yeah.
Why am I so overwhelmed? And I think as ministers, we have to learn to balance that out. I've learned in my 43 years that of ministry that always said, when you don't see God fighting in your camp, he's in the enemy's camp messing things up over there.
Okay.
And we see that scripturally, with the prophet, where he looked out on the mountainside or his servant and saw all the enemy that was surrounded them. And he said, Father, open his eyes and let him see. And the army of God was far outnumbering the enemy when we see what God's doing behind the scene, And in ministry, we have to learn to walk that understanding that when I don't see God, when I feel like God's abandoned me, when I feel like God doesn't care, and I don't see the hand of God moving on my behalf, then I have to stop and just breathe for a minute and know that when I'm at that point that I'm too tired to fight, God is always fighting for me.
Yeah.
And so my call at that moment is not to fight, it's to trust. And that's in the blog. That my role now is isn't a battle for me to fight. This is a battle to let him fight. And my role right now is just trust him.
It's so hard, though.
And it is so hard. Man, if you got my personality, it's very hard because, if I don't see God moving, I like to help him out and make a bigger mess that he has to fix. But, it's a continual struggle. I'll call it a struggle or conflict or, whatever word we want to tag to it. I think that pastors walk through often of, God, if you cared, why?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, as we navigate, I mean, it's so hard as pastors because you're right. And, we get hit from so many different angles. I mean, you equate it to being a father, but there's just layers to even what that looks like.
Right.
And, going through different seasons where you're asking the question, like, do I want to do this?
Yeah.
Like, do I really do I really want to do this? I mean, and just being honest, I've kind of been, we've talked, I've kind of been in a couple seasons lately where I've just been like, oh, dude, like I've kind of want to tell God, you can have it, man. You can not that I want to quit ministry, but there is part of me that's like, just gone through seasons where I'm like, man, you look at the situations you've done your best in, you look at the people you've given so much to, you even look at God, who you've done your best to serve, and have character and integrity, and be biblically faithful, and say yes to the calling, and the response to that in the circumstances where you've tried to do your best is for people to tell you didn't do good enough. For the people you tried to do your best for, to challenge you or question your character or any of those things. And you're like, how do we get here? Are you kidding me? And then even with the Lord, where you're saying, you're looking up to heaven saying, God, I said yes. Like I put my name down. I was praying for people when they didn't even know I was praying for them. I was faithful to my Bible. I've tried to be as close to you as I could be to you. I'm the first one there. I'm the last one to leave. Like I'm the, you know what I mean? And especially like, I think back to early years of ministry, you know what I mean? We launched our church, cleaning the toilets when the cleaning people didn't show up, and you know what I mean, and putting the stuff out for Sunday morning, and leading worship and preaching in the same service, and like doing everything we can to try to like, and then feeling like sometimes God's response isn't favorable.
Right.
It's like, God, I've done all of these things, and you just let this happen. You let this happen to my family. You let this happen to me, or these people are leaving the church, or this thing is happening over here, or just whatever, man. And that's when you can just kind of want to throw your hands up and be like, God, if you don't care, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like if you don't care, I don't care. And obviously he does care, but it feels that way. It feels like if and it's in those moments. I remember a sermon by Matt Chandler, where he essentially said, who are you to stack your chips against the Lord? Yeah. You already gave God your yes. And so whatever he decides, whatever path you go down, like you didn't be faithful so that God would owe you something. You were faithful because that's what it means to be called. Right. Like, and it's so hard. I know it's been hard for me, and I'm sure other pastors out there listening. And I know you struggled with this. So I know, and you can add to this whatever you want, because I know this was a struggle for you. I've done all the things that I've ever been called to do, and I've tried to do them with honesty, integrity, character. I've tried to be biblically faithful, help people, love people. Why am I going through this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Why is this a journey I'm on? Right.
Yeah. And again, that's really the topic, does he care? Or, if he cared, why am I faced with this? God, I was expecting something different.
Yeah, this sucks.
You've heard me say it. Even with my own family, I've been as part of a caregiver for one of my family members now for 14 straight years, between my father and my son in an accident, Tommy, my brother who passed away from a brain disease, same as my dad, and then Jabin, and now my mother, and they've all overlapped. It's been 14 straight years of, being by bedside, trying to do whatever. And, it got to a point I was asking God, can I have 1 year, just 1 year without the dynamic, the struggle, the hurt? And I'm down to a day. Yeah, like, God, can I have a day?
Just give me a day. No phone calls.
Day, down to a day. It went from a year to 6 months to 3 months to a weekend. I'm down to a day, man. Just 1 day without a phone call, without something tragic, or overwhelming hitting you, and you do. It's so easy. It's kind of like, I'm reminded as you were talking, the disciples, after they got in the boat and they're out there and the darkness came, the storm came in. And when you start really looking at that, they just got through watching Jesus feed 5,000, men plus women and children. So they just got through seeing an amazing miracle. So, he's coming. Mm-hmm. He's coming to get us. But he didn't come, and he didn't come. And then they're fighting this storm.
I hope he's coming.
Yeah. But their faith got challenged so much through those hours that when he came, they didn't recognize him.
Yep.
He's a ghost. It's a ghost.
Yep.
And they had been beat down and tired and wearied from fighting the storm until when he did show up, they didn't know it was him. And I think I know that's one of the plans of the enemy in ministry, is to just stay on us like that storm.
Yeah.
And just keep wearing us out because see, in pastoring, I have 4 children, and there were different times that one of you had an issue going, sometimes a couple of you, and there were seasons where there was nothing bad going on, or no issue that we were parenting through.
Yeah.
And those were breathing moments,
Yeah.
But as a pastor of a church, you get over 50 people, you don't have a moment.
No.
Constant. If you love your people and you care about your people, somebody's going through something all the time.
Yeah.
And so you're constantly having that, though you can't be the answer to everybody at everything, you still care.
Mm-hmm.
And out of caring constantly and not feeling that refreshing at times, then out of giving so much care, we question, does he even care?
Yeah.
We're cared out.
Cared out.
And so now it's left.
I don't care.
As much as I've cared for your people, God, do you care about me?
Yeah.
Because I am not feeling it right now.
Yeah.
And that's a legitimate place that pastors find themselves in.
Mm-hmm.
And, we just want you to know, I'm not here to tell you that there's going to come an end to the struggle, because there's not.
Correct.
But we can look at the scripture and we can watch testimony after testimony, yours, the losing of a son, starting a church and COVID hits. Your first 2 years was COVID as a pastor, I think, wasn't it?
First, yes. I took over in 2018 and COVID hit in 2020. And we lost Jabin 3 months after took over.
You took over.
Yeah.
And so it was just, one nightmare after another.
Yeah, we lost. Yeah, so we lost Jabin, and then we got kicked out of the building the year after that.
That's what it was. Yeah.
And then COVID hit the year after that, and so it's been.
Well, you lost Jabin. We were kicked out of the building. Then we went to the theater. Then COVID hit, and we had to leave the theater.
Correct.
God blessed us with this building, but it wasn't ready to go into, and we couldn't start church. It was ready, but we wanted to change some things. But COVID hit, and we couldn't meet at certain times.
Yep.
And through all of that,
then we had our first Sunday in the building. The next week, Hurricane Sally hit and tore the roof off of 2 of our buildings. Well, partially.
So, just a few things to occupy the mind and
stuff.
make you go, God, excuse me. Yeah, did you call me to this or not?
It's been great.
And but today we walk out there on a Sunday morning, man, and it is like amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just God's favor and God's faithfulness. And that's the whole thing of today, is that he is faithful.
Mm-hmm.
When we don't see him, when we can't find him, the old saying, we know it's there, is repetitive, but Job said, I look in front, behind, left, right, and I can't find God, but he knows the way that I take.
Yeah.
And he does.
Yeah.
And I just want pastors to be encouraged today that God does care.
Yeah.
And there's times that we feel like, where are you? And if you cared, why isn't this coming to an end?
Yeah.
And we've all asked that. But we all look back at one story after another in our journey, and it came to an end.
Yeah.
And we've seen God's faithfulness and God's goodness in it, and we learned something through it.
Yeah.
And it got us to where we are today. And so he's taken us on a journey, and it's always going to lead us into some situations in life that we're going to question his presence, and do you even care?
Yeah. No, that's so good, and it's so true. And I think what you said, the solution to that, like you said in the blog, and like you just said a few minutes ago, is that we just have to trust him. I've in the seasons where I've been overly frustrated, borderline burnout, those types of words, is when I was taking more on myself, more of the outcome of this church on my own shoulders than actually belong there. And saying like, I have to make this happen and I have to make that happen. And it's like, the reality is I don't have to make any of those things happen. Yeah. Like my job is to be faithful, love our people, lead our people, be faithful to the word of God, and lead my leaders, my staff, and try to, and be, and just, that's it. My job isn't to build anything. I don't, Christ said he'll build the church.
Yeah.
So anytime I try to take that from him and make that mine,
right.
I mean, that's when I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble already. And if there's anything that's my temptation, man, that's what I have to lay down to the Lord. And I'm in a season of that right now where I'm just kind of like, all right, God, whatever, like whatever I'm not going to put my hands on the steering wheel. I'm not going to try to take it over. I'm going to do the things I'm called to do. So it's not that I don't care. It's not that I'm indifferent. I care. I am passionate. I'm going to do those things. I'm going to do all the things I'm supposed to do, but trying to dictate and control the outcome of what Christ is called to build is ultimately his responsibility. And so I just have to surrender that, but that's really hard.
Yeah. It is, but in ministry, we have to, especially pastoring, we have to realize that some things are just inevitable. People are going to leave your church.
Yeah.
People are going to misunderstand you. You can be the best thing that ever happened for 5-10 years and then make one decision that somebody don't understand. And you're a demonic lunatic. This God, don't hear from God, can't follow you, and that's going to happen. Just part of the journey. And none of us want it.
It's true. It's true.
They're going to ghost you. They're just going to disappear.
I feel like I should name the top 3 reasons people have left my church over the last 3 months. I feel like I should just give those 3 examples right now. We're on
the podcast.
All right. The top 3 reasons people have left our church in the last 3 months. All right. Are you ready? Here we go. Number 1, they came to me and said, you need to cancel this event because if you don't cancel this event, God spoke to me and said that people are going to hurt. We did not cancel the event. We had the event and no one got hurt. And then they left because we didn't cancel the event. So they brought a false prophecy to me, and then when it didn't turn out to be true, they still left anyway. So I was like, all right, cool. The second one, we had a mind reader. So they were reading someone else's mind and said that something was happening that wasn't happening. And so then when we didn't move forward with their mind reading, then we were wrong and they left the church. And then my personal favorite, the one that's recent, we called a heretic, and someone left the church. So that's the last 3 big reasons that people have done something. And so I'm like, man, in every one of those scenarios, it's like we were biblically faithful, we were correct, and we didn't get swayed by whatever. And in each one of those scenarios, we did the right thing and they left anyways. Yeah. So to the pastor that's out there, that's like, man, if I could just do it the right way, there is no being biblically faithful to your calling and making everyone happy. And I have had to surrender that over and over again. And I think that was harder for you even than it is for me. I can be a little bit more cut and dry. You love people so well and so much. Like you have that in you way more than I have that in me. Like I don't get me wrong. I've seen you cut people off before, but it's like you give a lot more grace than I do. So I know that's been a struggle for you in the past.
Oh, no question. We all have a different personality.
Yes.
And I think some of it too, let's be very real. Especially in my earlier, well, I don't want to say earlier because there's panickers and pivoters.
Okay. I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
And panickers always look at, well, what's going to happen by my decision.
Right.
Pivoters go, okay, got to go left or right now. Which one are we going?
Yep.
They're not looking, you're a pivoter. Mm-hmm. You have a great gift and I commend that. I'm more of that one. Okay, what's the outcome going to be if I make this choice? I'm always going to come back to the best of my ability and make the biblical one, but I burn a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Getting to that point where a pivoter is not going to burn all that energy. They're just going to make the right decision according to Scripture. And we can call it grace. We can call it we can call it whatever we want to. I've always tried to be that. That person of grace, sometimes to the extreme, and I paid a price for it oftentimes. People that are going to leave. You may drag out their leaving by your grace, but they're gone.
They were. It's inevitable.
Once they lose respect for you, they're gone.
Yeah.
And, so we just have to learn, and we have some amazing people in our church right now that left another church and came here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not about just who's leaving here. People leave. Some of our greatest, most faithful people right now left the church. They left healthy. They didn't leave. Our philosophy is talk good about where you are, talk good about where you left.
Yeah.
And, let's build the kingdom. We don't own anybody. Just don't hurt the kingdom, whether you're coming here or going somewhere else,
And that's true. And for the record, we have amazing people. Like, we have great people in our church, but just like every, more people presents more problems, right? Like, so that's what I say, that as great as things are for our church, as well as things are going, those are the three over the last few months. Those are the three things that I'm like, wow, like, I can't believe, like, how dare you guys be biblically faithful, but and here's the thing that I was getting at with that is, like, how easy it is to only see those three things.
Right.
In the midst of, like, church is doing great, worship is great, people are being transformed by the gospel, all people, how easy it is to only see those three things, those three individuals, those three circumstances, and completely lose track of all the great things God's doing.
Yeah.
And then get overwhelmed and then let it control my emotions and then look to God and go, don't you care? And God's going, don't I care? Yeah. Stop looking at these three. Look at all around you. Look at all the things I'm doing. Look at all the ways that I'm blessing. Look at all the things I'm taking care of. Of course I care. If all you're doing is looking at the things that hurt, that's all you're ever going to see. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I'm a pivoter. I pivot towards process and progress. That's me. Like, what's going to move us forward? You pivot towards people. It's like you like, if I'm gonna move a direction, I'm moving the direction that's gonna take care of people. And I honestly, in my heart, you've heard me. I've complimented you on this time and time again. I strive in my heart to be better at it because I'm like, man, I need to be better at caring for people. And I do love people. I'm gonna pivot towards progress because I got to move this thing forward. Whereas you tend to pivot towards people. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think there's plenty of pastors out there. They're the same way. I can name 5 pastors that we're super close to in our city right now. They're going to pivot towards people every time. And I don't think that that's a wrong thing. It's not a right and a wrong situation. Maybe you're a pastor out there listening right now. And as we're talking about it, you're going, oh man, I'm a people pivoter for sure. And some of you are out there and you're like, man, I'm a progress pivot. I'm going to move the organization forward at all costs. I don't think one is better than the other. I think it's being aware of which one you are so that whenever you start getting frustrated, you start going, all right, what is it that I've given myself to that's causing me to feel burnout, tired, frustrated, angry? And then I'm looking at the Lord and asking, why does he even care? Well, if I'm pivoting and I'm choosing people, and then people are betraying me, well, then I can go, man, maybe I've been putting too much energy. I've been burning all this energy trying to keep people doing these things or whatever. And then the same thing, if I'm pivoting the organization, pivoting, trying to keep the organization, but I've taken upon myself the responsibility to grow this thing. Well, then, yeah, I bet you, of course I'm burnt out. Of course I'm tired because I can't keep people any more than I can change the overall dynamics of this organization. I can keep it healthy. I can push culture. I can teach leadership. I can develop disciples. I can do all those things. But at the end of the day, whether it's with the people or whether it's with the organization, at some point I got to go, God, I trust you. Yeah. You're in control of this whole thing.
And we have to acknowledge too, the size of your church is going to determine some of that too. I mean, when we had a church of 100 people, it's easier to be hands-on and really know the lives of 100 people and be a part of that. When you get 500, 600, 800, 1,000 or more or whatever, it's impossible.
Sure.
But a lot of times in the congregation, there's still an expectation of you being that.
Yep.
And you can't.
Yeah.
It is totally impossible. And as a pastor, if you try to walk that journey, you're short term.
Yeah.
It's just impossible to carry that kind of load emotionally, mentally, or physically. And that's where you have to change. You have to adjust.
Yep.
Or you're going to kill yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a requirement. And so, yeah, for all of us as pastors, man, we have to, take a deep breath And I think one of the best things we can do in this, and I know you have a few things you wanted to mention as well, as far as like ways in which we can keep this moving forward and make progress. But I think one of the biggest things we can do is get to a quiet place.
Yeah.
And reflect on what God's done. You know, I know you, like I said, I know you got your 3 things, but for me, it's getting to a quiet place. You know, I was just traveling back from Guatemala this week. And I had a 5-hour layover in Miami airport. And so I'm sitting at one of the lounge areas, just working. And then at one point I was just resting and just, you know, nothing but time to think and just all the things that's going on for me currently in this season of being a pastor and the struggles and the things and the whatevers. And I'm going, you know what? It's going to be all right. And God even speaking to me going, you know what this is? You've been through this before, right? So the different struggles that we're going through and the different seasons that we're in and kind of what God's doing and it feels this way. And it's like, this is a familiar feeling. And God's going, yeah, you know what this is. You've been through this before and you'll go through it again. And, you know, there's a life cycle.
Yeah.
You know, so you go through this and you go through the next thing, you go to the next thing, you go to the next thing, and then you start over and and you just do it bigger, but you're still in this thing. And so we're in this part of the life cycle of a church where it's like, oh yeah, I know what this is. And okay, God, like you got it. You know, I'm going to do all I can, but I'm not going to freak out over this. Like, you got it. I know you care. You're not indifferent. Just because I'm going through it doesn't mean you're not here or close by or any of those things. So, but being able just to reflect on that and say, all right, God, you got it. Yeah. You got it. But sometimes you got to get close and get quiet, you know?
Yeah. It, goes back to the term we hear a lot and people use a lot of times just as an excuse, but the word pruning, there is a reality in a scripture, in context, where God talks about the pruning of the house, and you cut a bush back so that it can become thicker and healthier.
Yeah.
And we see God, he'll always do that in the ministry.
Yeah.
And none of us like those seasons, those pruning seasons. And God's going to take people out of your ministry that aren't bad people, and they're not against you. It's just their time's up. You know, I've heard this saying, and you have too. There's people in your life that are long-term, and there's people in your life that are put there for a short season.
Yeah.
And we have to understand the difference of the two and not try to make it a personal thing.
Correct.
And John Hagee always said, every person that comes to your church has a way to be a blessing one or two ways, some by staying, some by leaving. He said, don't turn down the blessing, and that doesn't mean they're bad. No, it means don't chase people that don't belong there right now.
Yeah. Scott Thomas, Pastor Scott down in Lego. It's like, people have been leaving my church since the day I started it,
Yeah.
So, and not that this whole podcast is about that. It's just that, you go through seasons where we've kind of been processing one of those seasons as a church right now, where it's like, hey, love you, glad you were here, praying for you. I'm glad, and I'm glad that God's taking you somewhere else if that's what He's doing. I'm not in control of that, and just surrendering those things. But you've got 3 things that we process when we're asking God, do you care? And so what are those things?
Number one is, we've kind of talked about them already, but we'll highlight them. Is when you're not sure what to do, is stop, sit back, and let God lead.
Mm.
Kind of what you're saying, there. Just, you got to find that quiet place. And sometimes when we feel that God's abandoned us, I've caught myself doing this as a leader. We have 2 extremes that we do. One is we isolate, and we're seeing that happen a lot in ministry today. And the other one is you become overactive and feel like activity and noise.
Yeah, overstimulation.
Energy, is going to get me through this. And then you find burnout because it didn't change anything.
Correct.
And now you're really wore out. And I think it's finding that balance, that sometimes you got to just step back. It goes back to let God fight and we trust.
Yeah.
And just let God lead. He's got it. It's His church.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that in that Pastor Chris Hodges, Church of the Highlands, one of the things he says you need a disconnected activity in your life. You need an activity that lets you think about nothing but that activity while being disconnected from all the other responsibilities. For me, that's golf. I'm a golfer. Over the last 9 months, I've taken up golf. I love it. That's my jam. But if you go on that golf course with your mind on something else, it's going to be a bad day. You're going to make everyone that you're golfing with question whether or not you're actually called to ministry, because you're going to have a lot of choice feelings and words, while you're golfing. But so you have to, if you're going onto that golf course with your mind still on everything else, it's going to be a bad day. So you have to, and I'm not doing that. And I'm going to give I'm having an activity, and that's where you can truly get rest. And so obviously we need physical rest, but we need an activity that removes all the responsibility. And so I just want to encourage pastors that if you don't have that thing, if you don't have something, it's not a Bible in your hand. It's not, not any of those things. Teaching can motivate you. It can energize you, but it's still a responsibility. What is the thing that has no responsibility, and it's helping you rest? And I saw something recently that just challenged me. And it said, don't confuse disassociation with rest.
That's good.
Where you're choosing to pull away from everything and everyone, and you're calling it rest, but you're not. Your brain is still spinning, and it's like, that's not rest, because you're not rested. You're just disassociated. Yeah. So getting to a place where you can truly rest. And so, yeah.
And it has nothing to do with spirituality.
Nothing.
Even
though I pray a lot during golf, but it ain't.
No, one of my roles here that you set up is I meet with all of our staff once a month, and we talk and just deal with life and make sure our team's healthy. And one things I ask them all, John's here, he's one of them, is what are you doing for fun?
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the church, nothing to do with ministry.
That's right.
You got to balance it out, or we're in trouble.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, definitely is something that we have to be serious and looking at. Mm-hmm. And the other one we've talked about it, is we have to realize that God's fighting, and we just have to trust him.
Yeah.
He's fighting for us, not fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was thinking when I just read that again, before we got to Fairfield, we were in a little building on Airport Boulevard, and we were leasing, and then they shocked us and said, hey, you got, 30 days to give us this much money for the building, or we have a buyer. And, offering that, and it was crazy money, and we couldn't afford it, had no place. And one of our guys drove by and saw the church on Fairfield was for sale. Long story short, they already had a buyer, but our guy kept going by there going, no, God, this is our building. We're going. And he kept calling me and going, that's our building. God told me. And I'm like, somebody else already has it, Rick.
It's not ours, actually. Yeah, someone else already.
Somebody already has a contract on it. And they, and it fell through. And they called me and said, you're next in line, but you got 2 days to bring the money, because we do have somebody with cash.
Yeah.
And we had $10,000 saved up, and they were selling it for what they owed for it. It was worth more, but 180 grand. So I had to come up with 170 grand in 2 days. And the banks, were laughing at us because we didn't have longevity or income for that. And a pastor friend in New Jersey calls me on a morning. This is what I'm saying. We trust God fights the battle. That's what I'm leading to.
That's right. No, you're right.
While we had no idea what God was doing, I couldn't see it. I was frustrated. I'm like, God, are we abandoned? Are we orphaned now? We have no place to worship.
Do you even care?
Yeah. Do you care?
Do you even care?
I just got kicked out of the building, that. And so God wakes up a pastor in the middle of the night
in New Jersey,
and tells him to call me that morning and find out what's going on. And so he calls me. It was like 6:30 in the morning. He said, Dan, God woke me up last night. What's going on? And I said, well, I told him the story. He says, give me about 15, 20 minutes. He calls me back and he says, we're wiring you down $170,000 as your building. God said, buy it.
Amazing.
I mean, when's that happen?
Yeah.
You can't make that happen.
Nope.
And told me we didn't have to pay them back. And I said, no, we don't operate like that. And of course, the bank jumped all over us then when they found out we had that kind of backing.
Yeah, right.
And we borrowed the money and paid them back.
Yep.
And we've watched God do that so many times, with the shelter that we had and the property that we had and where we were getting ready to purchase a property to have a ministry for people coming out of prison. And right at that moment, Katrina hit. And we had all those people from Katrina coming over here sleeping under their cars. And, you know, we had a place there, what was it, 80-something rooms?
80, I think 85
no bed,
rooms.
not any furniture, no food. And,
Nothing.
And
all we had was rooms.
And God said, open
No
it.
beds.
And I called the owner, and he was from over there, from Baton Rouge. And he said, by all means, man, open it.
Yeah.
We opened it with nothing, not a can of corn or anything.
Yep.
And we watched God furnish every room, food. We had over $500,000 come through our hands.
Yep.
You know, from professional ball teams sending money, churches sending money, bars in town were calling me going, and they brought it in broken whiskey bottles. And it was crazy. Like, we offered it to other churches, but they said they wouldn't take unholy money. I said, we do. God said he's going to take from the unrighteous, give to the righteous. Right. We'll take it.
That's right.
But we watched God do that. And when we couldn't make it happen, we had to trust him, knowing that he's working behind the scenes.
Yep.
And,
absolutely.
you know, you've heard me tell, and I don't take any more time, but we were at a point we had to buy bedroom beds and mattresses and all that for the bedrooms because we had families in every room.
Yep. And
Kathy and I was at the furniture store with a credit card, getting ready by faith to purchase beds for 82, I think it was 82 rooms.
Yep. And
a family was going to give us a discount. They owned it, but it was still a lot of money. And my phone rang. You know, this is a truth.
Credit card in hand.
In hand, getting ready to put it in the machine. And my phone rang, and it was a family from California that had heard about it. And they told me, they said, put the owner on the phone, and they paid for all of the furniture.
Yep.
That I had the card in hand 30 seconds away from paying for, and God had it already set up. He was fighting for us when we couldn't see it.
That's it.
And pastors, I just want you to know, when you can't find him, when you can't feel him, when you can't see him, he's fighting for you. We just have to trust him.
Yeah. Which brings you to number 3, which goes right in line. God's power is more than sufficient for those that trust and believe in him.
That's
so
right.
He's sufficient. We'll be all right.
It's all easy to preach.
It's all easy to preach. Hard to live.
It's fun to preach.
Hard to live.
But man, is it hard to live sometimes.
Hard to live.
Absolutely.
So, well, pastors, we want you to know, we want you just to be encouraged.
Yeah.
You know, you're not alone. We talked about a few of our struggles on here today. You know, some of them are stories you've probably heard before if you've heard other episodes. You know, it's like, it's always there. It's you know, God has called us. And so be encouraged today. And when you find yourself asking the question, God, do you care? Of course he cares.
Yeah.
You're called. And so walk in your calling, be faithful, and watch what God will do, and trust him. That's the best place you can be.
Sure.
Thanks, as always.
Oh, thank you.
All right, guys, if you want to find more information, make sure you check out pastor2pastor.life. You can check us out on Instagram as well at pastor2pastor. All right, guys, we appreciate you. Love you. Catch you guys later.